this isn't the last crisis that we are going to go through, but I think we have the framework for the kind of bipartisanship that the American people need and want.
I thank the senator from Arizona. He brought a very experienced voice to our group. Yes, we've averted this crisis, but we need to stop having these crises. We need to actually come up with a long-term solution in a balanced way that brings down our debt, while at the same time doing it in a way that won't start another financial crisis.
Joining us live in studio to talk more about the events of the past couple of weeks and the reopening of the government, Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar. Good to see you again.
Thank you, Kathy. Great to be on.
So I hear that you and 5 of your other female senatorial colleagues got together, got the ball rolling toward a compromise. What's the takeaway of having that happen?
Well, the 20 women in the Senate are friends. We trust each other, and Susan Collins called us together and said this is going too far. People hurling insults day after day on TV. And we got together with a few good men, like Senator McCain, and really started talking all through last week about some ideas, many of which are in the ultimate agreement. And I do want to stress what you heard in that tape, that none of us saw this as a reason to celebrate and dance on the table. But it did get the government open again. We were able to pay our bills. And the next step, and what we were really focused on in our group, was setting up a process to actually go to Budget Committee. We've had a Senate budget, despite what some people think on Twitter, for a number of months, and we also have a House budget. And we have to, if you remember that old Schoolhouse Rock song about how you get a bill through on Capitol Hill, we have to go through a conference committee. That's what's starting yesterday with the work of Patty Murray and Congressman Ryan. And I thought their words were good. They talked about finding common ground, and there is a lot of anger out there that I think is going to help propel some agreement.
But they're talking common ground, but they couldn't promise some kind of an agreement. Do you think, why this group? Why would they be able to get a compromise?
First of all, they have till December 15th, and then something happens on January 15th that should push some kind of compromise, whether it's out of that group or not. That is that the next round of sequestration cuts comes in. That is over $20 billion in additional cuts to what we're seeing now to things like cancer research and Alzheimer's research and Head Start in the military. And so the hope is, including a number of Republicans, would like to see an agreement where we can at least replace those cuts, still bringing our debt down with some reform, with revenue, with closing loopholes, even passing the Farm Bill, and I'm on that conference committee.
I want to ask you about that later.
That would save $24 billion on the debt over the last Farm Bill. So there are some simple things we could do here, and I'd like to see a bigger deal, but you also could do something to simply make sure that we're replacing some of these sequestration cuts. And I think with the public being so angry after what's happened over the last few weeks, and a lot of these Tea Party people realizing that they had members of their party that were finally willing to stand up to them, members of the Republican Party, I think we've seen a sea change.
What are you willing to accept if there is a bigger deal? What are you willing to accept in terms of entitlement cuts or reform to be part of a grander bargain?
Well, there's a lot of things we can do with delivery system reform. The president actually put about $400 billion in Medicare changes on the table at the end of last year in his negotiations with Speaker Boehner. Things that we do in Minnesota, where we produce high-quality, lower-cost care that they're not doing in other states with the way we have a primary care doctor work together. Some of that's in the Affordable Care Act, but there's a lot more that we can do with Medicare in that way. So that's a major change. The second thing would be things like lifting the cap on Social Security. The tax now is assessed up to $115,000 in income. You could start it up again at $250,000 in income, or you could just have it go up from $115,000. Negotiating prices under Medicare Part D for prescription drugs would bring in $250 billion in 10 years. So when people start looking at these numbers, there are some smart things that we could do that would allow us to not just make all the cuts on 20% of the federal budget, which is what we're doing right now with that discretionary spending. The cuts we're seeing, which is up to $2.4 trillion, I'd like to get to $4 trillion to make this really work, but you can't put it all on that 20% of the budget. All these debt commissions that have come out have said it should be about a 2-to-1 ratio, cuts to revenue, or a 3-to-1 ratio. And that's from some of the most conservative gangs of 6, gangs of 8, debt commission. And right now we're running at 70% cuts, 30% revenue for the changes we've made on the debt reduction. And so that's why a lot of us are pushing to close off some of these loopholes. We got rid of the ethanol subsidy. That's $60 billion in 10 years. Get rid of the oil subsidy. That's $40 billion in 10 years. So there is money out there and ways we can do this without setting our economy back or causing a sharp contraction.
Part of the budget, of course, is the Farm Bill, and you're on the conference committee. And this has been a long time in coming. There's not been a Farm Bill. What makes you think there's going to be a final Farm Bill? Could there be?
Well, right in the middle of all this chaos came some opportunities, and one of them is the Farm Bill. 2 reasons. One is there's been a lot of pressure, especially with all the cattle dying in South Dakota. Right now, those farmers get nothing because of the fact that that part of the Farm Bill has lapsed. And so there's a lot of incentives right now with the people in farm states wanting to move. Second incentive, $24 billion. Because we get rid of direct subsidies in this Farm Bill, those direct agriculture subsidies, and move over to crop insurance, we save $24 billion over the Farm Bill that's in now. So if you look at it in terms of saving money, it's become much more desirable even to people who don't care about the Farm Bill.
Eric Paulson over in the House and you and Senator Franken in the Senate have talked about repealing or scaling back the medical device tax. Do you see that as a going concern here going forward?
Yes, and that was clearly considered this past week. We have growing momentum. In addition to Eric and Al, Senator Hatch and I have led the amendment in the Senate, and I think people were pretty surprised this spring where on the budget resolution we got 79 out of 100 senators to vote for repealing the medical device tax. Because people have realized now this is being taxed on $12 catheters and surgical gloves. And the hope is that in these negotiations coming up, as well as perhaps on tax reform. I just talked to Eric today about it, that we're going to find some place to at least make some changes to this tax.
You mentioned that the public is so angry, and yes, that's true, but the election is more than a year away. Do you think there's a lasting impact to what happened this past week?
Well, I do. I think what you saw here was this has been brewing in Washington for years, and it's been the reason we're not getting things done. And finally, maybe Ted Cruz's 24-hour speech where he wasn't really a filibuster, where he's reading green eggs and ham. I don't know what did it, but people suddenly started to realize that there is a group of people, mostly in the House, that are really slowing things down. And for the first time, you had not just Senator McCain, but even Senator Hatch yesterday, Senator Collins, a number of people in the House, day after day after day, that would say, this is not what we want for our party. We want to work with business. We don't want to go into default. We think it's a big deal if we go into default. So you saw almost an explosion on a public stage. And as much as it was difficult, in some way, it was brewing for so long and stopping us from getting things done that I think it creates some opportunities for the Farm Bill, for immigration reform, and for getting this budget done.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to see you again.
Good to see you.
Optimistic. Let's move. Thank you.
Good to see you.